When you focus on creation, you will recognize that according to predominant spiritual theory out there, there's this belief that originally there was an infinite light, an all-expansive light that filled all of existence. And that at a certain point, the light decided to constrict itself to allow for an outsider perspective, to allow for an other. Whether that other is designed in order to give to another, to benefit another, or to alienate another, all those narratives are all to make possible the expression of authentic love. Now, whenever we're discussing this idea of there being an outside consciousness from a singular construct, there's this eternal presence, awareness, so to speak, and then suddenly it's splintered off and there's an other. When that occurs, there is perspective and there is polarity. And a byproduct of that process, once it begins to evolve, is this idea of time. Within a unified consciousness, there is no time. There is no competition. There is no reference point. It is all universal and singular. It is the light of eternity. The moment you segregate or segment into an outside consciousness that feels detached from the initial consciousness, that detachment is helpful because it allows for authentic expression, recognition, and appreciation if that consciousness chooses to expand to it. But the moment there is this outside consciousness, there is a reference, and therefore there is polarity, which as a byproduct manifests a time continuum. Let's take this light, this consciousness, in its fullness. Let's call it eternal wisdom, so to speak. You can visualize it in a big sphere filled with light. Then I take a point, an outside consciousness. Look at this light as, visualize it as electrical, as energy. Almost like scientists that experiments in physics experiments would. Enter into the field, another consciousness. The energy will begin to take the form of a polarization. There will be energy that gets pulled towards the side of one point and energy that gets pulled to the side of the other point. And perhaps a vacuum may occur. A space where the two can possibly harmonize and coalesce again. So as a byproduct of there being other, there is a experience of past and future that separates one from the awareness of an I am of the eternal now. When we focus on the eternality of the soul, a big place that the spiritual aspirant will trip over is this concept of an eternal now, of an eternal awareness. Because what they can relate to very well is the idea of time as past. If they're children, they'll relate very well to the concept of time as right now. But there is no future. There is no later. As an individual expands within their cognition to abstract cognitive capacities, that are associated with an aspect of the soul that the mystics called nefesh. As they expand to that, they become increasingly capable of integrating with abstract concepts. And in doing so, they become increasingly capable of converging with aspects of their own identity that are more abstract. And in reference to this, what we're alluding to is within an eternal paradigm, through the eye of eternity, through the eye of an eternal awareness, we are alluding to the cascading repercussions of each now. In a fixed construct, based upon your last action in your most recent progression, there is a cause and effect variable that will come into play that leads to a certain evolution of consciousness through the eye of an eternal progression. So even if the consciousness is not unified, there is a sector of your soul that relates to all the future that will transpire based on your most recent now. And that future will transpire regardless if you're attached to the reverberations of your past. And so many spiritual disciplines focus on embracing the fullness of your eternal now. They call this the I am. And many spiritual traditions took that a step further. And they focused on the I am as I shall be, which was a concentration on the reciprocal progression that will transpire if I stand within my now of all that I shall become, based on this eternal moment. And they taught that if I reclaim the sanctity of my now, in other words, I create a field similar to the concept of a zero-point energy, where if there are reverberations echoing this way and there are reverberations echoing the opposite way, and I'm caught in that wind tunnel, that twerk, then I cannot get clarity in my consciousness because there is no grace, there is no peace. I am being volleyed like a ping pong ball between the various quandaries of momentum that are reverberating through the juxtaposing positions. And so if I isolate a field where I am in the eye of the storm, and the beauty of the eye of the storm is the eye of the storm is always so peaceful. And if I sanctify the eye of the storm where I am not part of what was and I'm not part of what will be, but I sanctify this quiet space and I make an authentic choice, then my choice is not a byproduct of what will be and my choice is not a byproduct of what was. And in that space, nothing has dominion over me. I'm not a byproduct of my emotional upbringing. I'm not a byproduct of my genetics. I am not a byproduct of collective karma. I am consciousness making a choice. And if I can execute that choice within the sanctity of the now, then the trajectory between me and my idealized self, the avatar of my own soul and spirit, is shortened. And as I execute that, there is a torrent, a river of flow that echoes forth from the future that rolls straight into my now. And from those cool, serene waters I can put out the fires of times past, because I am already sovereign. In mystical traditions, that formula was related in the Tetragrammaton, the four-letter divine name, which stood for many mystics as is, was, and always will be. This notion of the eternal calling out from the future, saying, shift in this way, change in this way, so that way I will exist as a unified essence. Because through the eye of eternity, we will eventually all coalesce in unity. And it is primitive to struggle and to fight for dominance if we will all be one, and we're all an expression of the same oneness. And in the archetypes, there were many who called out in this name, and they said, I had never heard of that deity. I've never heard of that concept. I have a book full of deities. I got 10,000 deities in my book, and I've never heard of this deity. And I assure you, they never heard of Windows Vista either. But this deity, this concept of the divine, is the birthright of all. There is none that is not included in it. It is the power of oneness. Oneness as expressed through the power of all. And it's the power of that name, of the concept of that name being a mathematical equation for a solution. It's the ultimate trump card in spirit. And it was that name that all the mystics would rely upon to overcome any adversary and any challenge. Because you can weaken any agenda if you can reach out to far enough expanses in the future where your opponent has the exact same trajectory and aim as you. And so the jostling forces begin to simmer down. And there's clarity. And the waves, they dissipate. And instead you have a reflective pool of consciousness from which to make an authentic choice within the gleaming now.